Okay, so I've got my floor plan starting to come together, and now I want to create a reflected ceiling plan to go with each of the floor plans. And so the easiest way is simply to copy the floor plan. In this case, I've got two of them, so I'm going to copy both of the floor plans. So I'm just going to copy them to one side using the regular copy tool. So I'm just going to pick a base point and then by eye bring that across to the right so that I've got enough room. And then I'll modify these and change them into reflected ceiling plans or RCPs. And so here you can see that it's showing the furniture, which of course we wouldn't see if we're looking up or if we're seeing a reflection of what's on the ceiling. So I'll simply delete all of that. The kitchen units as well, and I'll just be removed. I'm going to leave the benches for now because that might help me with the planning of my lighting, but in the end that will go too. So now I need to work out, and also this unit will go too, but I'll leave that for now. So those things, again, wouldn't be seen in the reflected view looking up towards the ceiling. Now the stairs technically wouldn't be shown either, but in many cases, if we don't need to see a ceiling above the stairs, you can leave those just to make the drawing easier to read. And the same with the windows, you can just leave those the same way as they are in the floor plan. Now, some people would take the door swing off. Now, to do that, I'd have to explode this because it's a block, but then we could remove the door. And that can be helpful because you'll often have lighting in that area and you don't want the doors interfering with that. Okay, and so then to work out what's on my ceiling, I can go to my first floor plan and either copy or somehow trace over these elements and transfer them to my floor plan, to my ground floor plan. So I'll simply copy these elements. So these here are the edge of my bedroom, which will be the underside of my ceiling. And then I've got a line here, again, which will be, again, the edge of the ceiling as it comes across to this wall. And so that's probably enough to get started. So I'm just going to use, again, the copy tool, find a base point on this plan that's useful, so this corner maybe of the building. And then I can come up and use the same corner on my ground floor plan to place these elements, and that way I know that they're lined up correctly with that floor plan. And now I already have a layer for my ceiling called A Ceiling, and it's got a nice, fairly light line weight there. Make that current layer. And then I'll select these lines that I've just copied across and change them to that same ceiling layer. Now that colour's a bit hard to see on the projector, so I'm just going to make that a bit brighter, just so that you can see it, hopefully. And so then I'll maybe use filler to join these lines together, and then extend this line across to the wall. And so that's really the bulk of it done. So I can see already what the ceiling shape would look like on the ground floor. And then that'll help me to resolve the structure a little bit more, because now it's much clearer to me that this corner here would require some additional support. There's a little extra line there which I'm just going to delete, and then I'll just check and join these lines together again. Oh, okay, so this is me not checking. I've got a fillet radius set, so I'll just go to fillet again and just use the radius option there, make sure that's 0, and then again join these lines. That's better. Okay, so that's again the shape of my ceiling viewed from the ground floor looking up, or looking at a reflection. So now I can copy this post across using the corner here, and then take that across. And I want to go perpendicular to this line. So I'm just making sure that it tracks that point, and you can see that it's projecting it still to this point here. And okay, so now I can actually copy that post back to my original floor plan. Now that I've worked out the position in my reflector ceiling plan, I can use copy, use the base point again on the corner of the building, and bring that across to my original floor plan. Okay, so that would be fine, having the post there in the middle of the space, that's okay. And so, maybe just so that's clear, I'll label, making sure I've got the right text. So you can see here I've got two text objects, which I showed you before, are set up for different scales. So this one was for 1 to 100. The other one was 1 to 50. So I'll use that one. And just copy this down, just so that if you need to do a similar post to mine, you know what to, how to label it. So that post there, can you tell what material it is just by looking at the colour? Exactly, spot on. Yep, good, great. Yep, excellent. So yeah, so you know, blue is steel, so that's good. And then what do you call a post like that? If it's square, steel. Have you heard of SHS? So SHS means square hollow section. So it's fairly easy. So if it's square, SHS. If it's rectangular, it's RHS, rectangular hollow section. And if it's circular, it's CHS, which is circular hollow section. Oh, well, you just need to work out whatever you need for your structure. You don't need to have a post in all cases, but yeah, it just depends on what your structure is. Okay, so it's just in my case, I want to have a post there, but that's just an example. You may not need one. So here again, I'm just going to put SHS, just so my drawings are easier to read. And then again, I can copy that text. You should, yeah, absolutely, yeah. If you're using abbreviations, yeah, definitely have a legend for that. And it's especially important here because I'm going to have this post exposed, which is fine. You can easily have steel posts exposed. They're not a bad feature actually, and so that's why I want to make sure it's labelled. So I'm just going to now copy this text back to my RCP. Okay, so then otherwise, it's mostly just basic services, especially lighting, that you need to show in your RCP, and also any emergency services. And so for residential, that's generally smoke alarms. And on yours, you're not going to have, most of you aren't going to have bedrooms on the ground floor, I'm assuming. You do? You don't? No. Okay, so if you've got a bedroom on the ground floor, just remember you always need a smoke alarm between the sleeping areas and the living areas. That's the basic rule. And so in this case, you might be able to get by with the smoke alarm on the upper level, where the stairs rise up to the bedroom. But it's probably not a bad idea to also have one on the ground floor if you've got a design like this. So you may have one between the stairs and the living space. So it could be in this area or even over here. I think with my design it would be okay just to have it on the upper level. So above these stairs, that that might work. But again, it really depends on your design. So again, for smoke alarms and also for other things, you'll see there's a block. If you go into the AutoCAD library folder on the P drive, and then blocks 2D, and then legends, and yeah, we've got an electrical legend there. It's called electrical legend. And we've got another one, electrical legend 1 to 100, and I'll just show you those. So in AutoCAD, you're going to go to Insert, and More Options, and then Browse, and find those files. Okay, so you'll see they're almost identical. The one that's set up electrical legend for 1 to 100, I've just modified a little bit so that it's set up a little bit better for a certain scale. So I'll insert that. And I'm just going to place that to the side. Now it's gone in on my ceiling layer, so I'm going to change that to an annotation layer. And I'm going to explode it, but before I do, I'm going to scale it so that it works for 1 to 50. And actually I've just forgotten the primary in the brief, so I'll just double check that. Pretty sure they'd be 1 to 50, but just want to make sure. I'm sure they'd be 1 to 50. Yeah, here we are, yep. Okay, so to make this block, or this legend work for 1 to 50, you can either scale it in properties or use the scale tool. So I've selected my block. I'm going to click scale. And then I'll just put a base point near the legend. And then type 0.5. That's my scale factor. So that takes it from 1 to 100 to 1 to 50. And then I'm going to explode it. So I've selected it, and I'll click explode. And so we'll use this legend in the end on the sheet, but for now, all I want is the ability to copy the things that I need. So here we've got a symbol for downlight. And it's very simple, it's just a square. But that's okay, that's what's being used on the legend. So now I can copy that onto my plan. Using the locations that I want for my lighting. So if you have things like counters, it's usually a good idea to place the lighting accordingly. If it's task lighting, in other words, required for people to perform certain functions. So actually maybe there, if you want to place it using measurements, you can set out other lines. So here I might use offset and make it, let's say, 450. And then we can snap that light. And then use mirror and other tools like that to place the lights, but again, that's going to depend on your design. Again, using construction lines like that, you can use tools that you've been using before, like divide. So there, I'll make that have 4 segments, and in fact, sorry, that's too many. I'll do 3. Okay, so then I can copy my light, snap into those points. placed more accurately. And then I can delete the construction lines. So that may work, but if this is a unit that needs to have connect to the ceiling, then again, might need to adjust that slightly. So again, it's going to depend on your design. And then again, we can copy maybe here. I'll just say, well, in fact, there maybe I'd start also by using mirror. And this line here might be useful, and again, drawing a line basically as a measuring stick. I can use divide just to divide them evenly. Yep, that might be okay. And again, copy that to those nodes. So of course the lighting's dependent on your own design, and you'll need to work that out. And aside from that, it's again just the smoke alarms which you need to show. So there should also be a symbol which isn't there anymore. Okay, so I'll make one and I'll put it back into that block actually. In fact, what I'll do is I'll make you a 1 to 50 legend. So, okay, so the standard symbol for a smoke alarm, which actually will fit nicely in here, so I'll just do that underneath these other symbols. Okay, so there is a standard symbol for smoke alarms, which I'll just draw now. So I'm just going to make that circle a bit bigger. And just drawing on that layer, just going to make it a cross, and then hatch, solid, two of those segments. That's the standard symbol for a smoke alarm. Okay, so I'll make that into a block that you can all access. Okay, so W is the shortcut I'm using there to make a block that I can write to its own file. So W means write block. And I'm going to choose an insertion point, maybe just near the corner there. And again, place that. So you can get to it in the AutoCAD library in blocks DB into legends, and we'll call it electrical legend 1 to 50. Okay, so if you use that one, you don't need to scale it the way that I scaled the 1 to 100. You can just use that one as is. Okay, so then again, I can put this symbol over onto my drawings. Okay, so even though it may not be required to have a smoke alarm that's on this level, I think I'm going to put one in anyway, just to be safe. And there are a few different locations actually, because you've got to remember this is a void. So when there's a fire, smoke would rise up around these, the two sides of the ceiling or the floor structure. So it really could be anywhere, but you probably don't want it too close to the kitchen, because it might go off when you don't want it to. And so maybe we'll still put it over near the stairs, and really in an area that's going to at least connect to that void would be good. So maybe in the corner here. Yep, so something like this maybe. But there would need to be another one on the level above, definitely. So maybe just move that, move it away so it's a bit nicer. But again, that's probably enough. Okay, so then it's basically the same idea on the upper level. So if you have an exposed ceiling structure, you'll need to show that. In my case, this would have the raked ceiling lined with plasterboard. So what you would see there is just a line where the corner of these edges of the plasterboard show. Okay, so you could project that. Sorry. So you could copy your section and rotate it so that it's off to the side here, and then project lines across. But you can see here, if I measure from the corner across to where this corner is above, I can then look down here and see the delta x. So the diagonal distance was 2117, but the delta x there is 1723. So that's the distance across. So from here, from this corner point, measuring horizontally across, is again 1723. So I can just look up that figure, 1723, come down to my ceiling plan. Okay, so I measured from this wall. So I can offset that distance, 1723, from the wall, down, and then before I go too far, I'll change that new line to the correct layer, to my ceiling layer. And then I'd need to work out which of these lines are projecting. So some of these walls may project all the way up to that ceiling, and I know in this case that they do. So we can see that some of that, looking at the section here, and even here. Okay, so they start, well actually they stop just short of this main ceiling. So they still do need to be shown. So I'm not going to delete all of those walls. But the edges of the floor, which is these lines here, actually even these, that can all be deleted. And this wall, so that's the wall underneath the bed, essentially, or that supports the bedroom. So again, looking in the section here, you can see that's a low height wall. What's got a balustrade at the end, but it's again, it finishes well short of the cut plane height for this view, which will be about here. So again, looking at the ceiling plan, so none of this needs to be shown. Okay, so that can all be removed. So now coming back to my line that I've drawn for the ceiling, I can extend that across to the end wall here, just making sure it's perpendicular. So there it's perpendicular, so it stays at a right angle. Okay, so again, to make it less confusing, this door here could be exploded and have the door swings removed. No, so that'll be a continuous line because we're looking at that ceiling here. Yeah. So now this could be mirrored because we'd assume it's the same on the other side. Right, this line, this circle can go as well. And the, well, here, these rooms, again, they're going to have essentially another ceiling in this case. So, again, it's dependent on your design. But these rooms here, even though they're below the main ceiling, but they'll have their own ceiling that would show up, again, in the ceiling plan. So I'm leaving those walls deliberately. And that's fortunate because it means that I won't need to see all of the hip, but I'll still see some of it. So I'll just draw that in, and that probably is a good point to finish. So again, if you're lining that ceiling, you're going to see the angle here coming up. And it might seem like a tricky thing to work out, but it's actually fairly easy because we know that any two roof shapes that join together of the same slope, if they're at the same angle, they'll join together at 45 degrees. So I can simply draw a line from the corner with polar set to 15 would be fine. Then it will snap to 45 degree increments. Okay, so I'm not going to see it inside the bathroom here because again it's going to have its own flat ceiling. And so eventually I'd clear all of these interior bathroom fixtures and we just see the flat ceiling inside. So I'll delete some of them. And then this line here, which is again the corner of that raked ceiling, or the edge, that can also be mirrored. Now using any of these lines that give me the centre of the building. And then again I can trim using the edges of the wall here maybe. Yeah, no, you're right. So I must have used something that wasn't in the middle, but we can always just move that one up and that will keep the angle. So I'll just move that up to the corner. And then again trim using the edge of the wall. Oops, I must have pressed enter, so I'll just do trim again and make sure I get the right cutting edge. Yeah. And while I'm at it, I can clean up the drawing. So the stairs here again, sometimes they're left in ceiling plans, but they don't have to be. And again, if you think about what you would see above that, well, we wouldn't see the stairs, of course, looking up. So I can delete that now, at least from this plan. And now it makes it a lot clearer. This line, again, that wouldn't be shown either. There we are. So now, a bit easier to see what's happening. And so, again, just thinking about what we'd see looking up. If these cupboards have their own little ceilings, which is really just the top of the cupboard, then we'd see either side of them. So there's a gap here, and then of course over to the right. So we'd see the higher level ceiling there. So again, using trim, now I can cut around my walls. I have to come back and tidy this up, but at least I can cut around them and bring this line, bring that line back, and this one too. Oops. And then maybe to finish off, I'll draw in a line maybe using, well, what I'll do in fact is draw a new line through the space, just as a temporary line that I can then snap to the midpoint so that I've got that set out accurately. And we'll extend that back across to here, and I'll have to, well, I'll just take that line of the door away so it's not confusing. Yeah, so so what's happened there, this one's not symmetrical, so I must have again mirrored using the wrong line. So I'll just mirror again this line using the correct one that I've now drawn in. That's better. And well, just to save time, I'll move these up, and then I can delete my new line. There we are. So that should be symmetrical now. Okay, so again, just thinking about what we'd see. So if this is a cupboard, which has its own little cupboard top, which effectively is acting like a ceiling, then again, in plan, in a reflected ceiling plan, we're not going to see that. In other words, we're not going to see the ridge because the little roof of the cupboard will block that. So again, I can use trim, cut that away, and there we are. So maybe I'll leave the furniture there for now because I want to have that to place my lights, but then once the lights are done, I would delete all of those elements as well. But again, when you see that, hopefully that'll help you to visualise what you would see looking up towards the ceiling, if you have a raked ceiling. And these can be placed on the sheets, just the same as any of the other views, of course. So that's the basic idea with reflected ceiling plans. They're, in this case, mainly to show lighting, but also your emergency services. And so there, you do need to indicate material, so it should, in most cases, be plasterboard, unless you have an exposed floor or ceiling structure, in which case you just note that. So either note that it's plasterboard lined, and you'll find once you've done a few notes, you can usually copy notes that you've already done. So here, this one for my plasterboard lined stud framed wall. I can use that for the ceilings as well. So maybe we'll, on the ground floor, say it's a plasterboard lined timber frame. Oops. Also a timber floor structure, or just say if you're lining the floor joist, just plasterboard lined floor structure or floor joists. Just so that it's clear what you're looking at, and that indicates the materials. So essentially you've got a line to distinguish the edge of any of your materials. And so that's what it means. So here, the material junctions. So essentially you need a line for the edge of any material. And then of course also the light fittings. So if you have any different light fittings, ones that aren't in the legend there, just make up your own symbol for them. Oh yes, sorry, yeah, that's the final thing. So I should have mentioned that. Yeah, sorry, of course. So we don't have the. Oh yes, we've got a switch symbol. So we'll just use this one. It's not the best, but yeah. So you'll see in the examples that I've left on the P drive, you should have some ceiling plans. Oh well, in this one it's got ceiling plans in there, and I did have some others, but I'll. I've got them in another folder. There we go. Okay, so I've just made a folder called ceilings, and you can get all these drawings from there. Right, so you've got there some more examples of those things I was mentioning earlier, the track systems and the other ways of supporting ceilings if you're not doing timber frame. There's a more typical timber frame. And here, these are some different types of ceilings which you don't need to worry too much about, but then we've got some reflected ceiling plans. So this is one without the circuits, and then here is one with the circuits showing. Now, don't try to be an electrician when you're doing these circuits. You're not trying to show the wiring. And that's a common mistake. When people see these, they think that's where the wires are going. And that's not it at all. You're not trying to show that. all you're trying to show is which lights connect or which lights control, which light switches control which lights. Okay, so back into here. Okay, so I'll make a new layer and I'll make these begin with E for electrical, and we'll just call it circuit. C-U-I-T, I-U-T. Spelling's terrible today. CIR, there we go. Bone dead. Okay, so CIR, of course, the circuit. There we go. And let's make it any old colour, doesn't really matter. Okay, so I'm going to make this have a hidden line type. Well, actually, I'll use hidden too, just to make sure we can see the dash. Okay, so I might have here maybe these lights on one circuit. So I'm going to draw an arc, just connecting those lights, and then just continue that, or maybe copy that arc onto each one, and then that would connect to the light switch. So here we've got a very simple symbol for the light switch, just a cross. You'll see there are more complicated symbols that you can use when you have maybe more complex lighting, but in this case it's such a small and basic project, we can just use that basic symbol. The cross is enough. You can, that's an option. So you can put it, if you put a number in millimetres, you can specify that. For CC drawing, which is really what we're doing, that's not necessary. So that's something you'd do more with working drawings. So here, no, it's not required. And
do we put dimensions like from the corner, or
no. So those things, I mean, electricians can work that out on site usually, as long as you're given a rough location. And it's probably better not to be too precise. If you're not totally familiar with all the construction requirements, you can actually get into trouble when you put too many dimensions on and they're wrong.
it is there.
Yeah, it's drawn roughly, but again, if you put a measurement on and it's not appropriate, the electricians are still going to follow that measurement rather than using their own experience and judgment to maybe work something out that might be better. So if you're not sure, and the same with the heights, there are standards and conventions that are followed generally, and if you're not sure about those things, just put it in roughly, and the electricians and the people who've got experience will do it more precisely, following more established conventions. So yeah, so again, for construction certificate drawings, I think it's going too far if you put those measurements on. So here again, I'll just copy these to make another switch. And so then I'll draw an arc connecting this final light to the first switch there, and then we can have the other switch connecting to the other lights. Okay, so that indicates pretty clearly that, again, if I continue this arc, or drawing more arcs to these other lights, let's copy that across. Okay, so that indicates really clearly that we've got these lights on their own circuit, controlled by this switch, and then the other lights here controlled by a different light, or sorry, a different light switch. And that's enough. You'd only need to do the exact specifications of the number of switches on a particular panel, and the exact position of those light switches if you're doing working drawings, which you're not doing. You're just doing CC drawings, or drawings for approval, and this is more than enough. So that's it. Lights, smoke alarms, and the basic shape of your ceilings with the line for the edge of the material. So this is the edge of the plasterboard. We don't expect you to know how to do floor fascias, so you don't need to put a thickness there, even though you might know that. Well, if you know how to do them, put the floor fascias on if you know how to do that, but it's not required. Would you even know what it means when I say floor fascia? Do you know what a fascia is? Yeah, it is, pretty much, that's right. That's a good way of thinking of it. It's cover, it's the edging. So here, the ceiling and the floor, if we go into that section I showed you earlier, so that's the floor structure. And then we'd have the ceiling lining on the bottom, and then the floor lining on top. And that would all need to be covered by a fascia piece. In other words, a trimmer, a piece of timber that covers from the top to the bottom all of that lining and the structure as well. But again, we don't expect you to go that far with this project, so you're welcome to put them in if you like, but you really just need to show the edge of your ceiling lining, the plasterboard. If you know how to add the extra thickness in for your fascia, you can do that, but again, it's not required. So something like this, that should be enough for your reflective ceiling plane.
Not even on our dimensions, what?
No, don't dimension. No, do not. No. It's actually bad practice because, again, those things need to be fine-tuned and worked out properly on site, and the electricians know how to do that. So yeah, it's not a good idea to dimension. I know sometimes people, because they want to get their design to be followed, they will dimension the lighting spacing, but generally you don't need to. It's fairly clear because you've got the walls and everything else, they'll be drawn with and built with exact measurements, and then the electricians can set out within those new walls and the ceilings that have been constructed, and then they can work around the structure.
What about the amount of light? You specify how many?
Yeah, well, that's another whole kettle of fish because, working out lighting units is actually a very technical exercise to do that mathematically. There are some guides. If you just search for general guides for lighting levels, you will find them, and they'll tell you rough levels of lumens, but even to work that out, it's quite technical. So we're not doing that at this stage. That's something you need to investigate later, how to get the right number of lights. Yes, you should. Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you have them, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if you need mechanical ventilation, yep, show a symbol for an exhaust fan. So do you know? Actually, we should have maybe touched on that earlier. Do you know when you need exhaust fans? Mechanical ventilation, in other words. Pretty much, yeah, sort of, yeah. Exhaust fan. So when do you need to have an exhaust fan? Pretty much, yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah, so if the bathroom doesn't have a sorry? Laundries don't need them, but it's not a bad idea, but they're not required. So it's required in the bathroom if it doesn't have a window, or if it's adjoining a food preparation area. So if it's next to a kitchen, then even if it's got a window, it still needs to have an exhaust fan. Otherwise, though, if your bathroom's a lot do, but I've done a few bathrooms recently without any exhaust fans. If they've got big windows, it's fine. But yeah, usually they do have them, even if they've got windows. And then for kitchens as well, they're not required. So it's only a requirement in those bathrooms next to kitchens especially. But then for kitchens, it's not a bad idea to have them as well. But a range hood maybe is enough. Even those are optional. A range hood, so over the stove, you can have those purpose-built exhaust fans. They're actually seen these days as not being the greatest option because they basically just recirculate the air. They don't generally connect to a separate exhaust. In other words, one that takes the air to the outside. So it is optional, but if you want to put one in, it's not a bad idea. Even if it's a kitchen like this, where you may have to have those recirculating range hoods, that's an option. So a range hood maybe wouldn't be shown in the ceiling plan, but yeah, if you've got bathrooms, so maybe here we might have a, or definitely would have to have an exhaust fan there, and yeah, you should definitely show that as well. But that's it. So yeah, don't want to go in too long with that, but unless you've got any questions, might finish there. Hopefully that's fairly clear. And yeah, sure. Oh yeah, so was it anything about ceiling plans, or you just want me to look at something of yours? Yeah, okay, sure.